Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be, East Coast, West Coast, around the world, or Glenn Williams sitting there working and watching my show. Welcome to Tall Tales with Taco. My name is Mitch Bell. I'm your host. They all call me Taco. That's pretty easy to remember, right? Listen, if you guys are sitting out there and you're watching this on my Facebook page, do me a favor. Go to the Facebook page, Tall Tales with Taco Bell, and go like it and subscribe to that for me so that you can catch all the shows because there are times that I probably won't put it on my own personal page. It just gets out of hand sometimes. I appreciate it if you help me out with that. And to start things off, I'd like to say a big shout out to Don Williams out in San Diego. Happy 80th birthday. You have been so much fun. I got to tell you, these things are collector's items. And Don sent these out to me for the show. So just know that. Can you hear it? Yeah, I think it. Yeah. These things work great. Don, I can't thank you enough for my presence. You are a godsend. A lot of fun when I go hang out there. Last week, I was up in Oshkosh. If you guys were available and were up there, I would have loved to have run into you. Escorted 2 Medal of Honor recipients. Got the just it was a great time with General Pat Brady and Kyle Carpenter, who received the Medal of Honor in Afghanistan, jumping on a hand grenade to save the life of his fellow Marine. And of course, General Brady was a dust off pilot in UEs and just saved an incredible amount of folks, not only himself, but all of the folks that were dust off guys. So big shout out to them. It was a blast. If you guys are in New Orleans next week, or no, I'm sorry, this coming up weekend, like in just a few days, going to be out there for the Band of Brothers reunion. They've got all the actors, a ton of actors coming out who will be there. I'll be with Leighton and Matthew Litch and um, Pretty Joe Farnsworth. If he's on here tonight, he always likes to pop in every now and then. Dale Dyer will be out there. It's going to be a blast. So if you're in New Orleans, come by and see us. We'll be at the World War II D-Day Museum. So come on out. Tonight, though, we're still kind of on a naval theme. Last week, I interviewed Andy, who is he's Bircher is a 2-star admiral, also served on submarines. Tonight is all about World War II. And this book is just incredible. So, Days of Steel Rain, if you haven't read this, please do me a favor. Do yourself a favor. Go to Amazon, pick up a copy, give it to your favorite loved one who's into any sort of military history. This is equivalent to Band of Brothers, World War II, naval part. Brent Jones, who is a Dallas native, currently down in Austin right now, he's going to be coming to us from Austin, wrote this book. And he puts you alongside a whole gamut of crew members as they progress from building the ship to the trials, to the engineering problem and woes they had, to going out to the Pacific and fighting the Japanese in some of the hardest battles that we naval ships served in. I mean, my grandfather was in Okinawa on the USS Mugford, and I just remember his stories about the Japanese kamikazes. These guys were horrible and would just totally terrify the crews with the amount of damage and carnage that they created. So tonight we're going to talk about this book, talk about the people, and a big shout out. I've got my dad on board, who is a retired Navy officer. He had 21 years. With my 29 years, we've got 50 years of service between us. He is a chief engineer. He helped design power plants. There's a lot of stuff that goes on with this ship that I think my dad might be able to help Brent and I talk about. But my dad's going to join us tonight. Welcome, Brent Jones and John Bell. How are you guys doing?
Hey,
Good
Taco. Thank
evening.
you so much.
Yeah. Hey, so Brent, you never served in the Navy, and yet your book, Days of Steel Rain, is written as if you had served back in that time. It was almost, you transported me back into 1943 when they were starting to lay the keel, or 44, right? No, 43, they were starting to lay the keel.
Mhm.
All the issues that they had with the construction of the ship, finding the personnel, the captain, the XO, the people that it was like Band of Brothers. You built this cadre, and then as the ship and the progression goes down, you kind of grew up with them, and you really built a bond with these characters. And they're not characters; they're real people. That's what makes it so special. Well done, first of all. Well
Thank you,
done.
sir. Thank you very much.
So, how did you come up with this idea to do this? Tell us about your uncle and.
So my grandfather and his brothers all served in World War II, Pacific Theater, and my great uncle, who ironically is not in the story at all, was a member of this crew, and he just never spoke about his experience. I was too young to really have asked him much about it when he passed away, and that just became a recurring theme. I wanted to learn about what he saw, what he experienced at Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the strikes against Japan at the end of the war, and I built a website to commemorate the ship and met some of these guys. They came out of the woodwork, some of them that were online, even in their octogenarian stage, and would reach out and start talking. So, but the recurring theme, I opened the book with a thing called The Silence, which is specifically how so many of these folks didn't ever speak about what they had. But what some of them did was keep secret diaries. It was completely unauthorized. It was probably the reason they did it is just because it was against Navy regulations.
Well, I mean, they kind of figured too, if the ship blew up, how are the Japs going to get that diary?
Yeah, exactly. But some of them wrote it in like Greg shorthand and just wrote on maps, did all these different ways of keeping track of things, and some of them still had it, and they sent them this my way, and that's where a lot of the narrative came from, was matching that against the official records that are in the National Archives and going, okay, on this date, this person was writing about this, but, and here's the ship's deck log at the same time. And you could put the two together and come up with a pretty cool story.
Yeah, no kidding. So start us off with the captain, because truly he was the glue that made this just an incredible crew.
It's amazing that George Dyer was even at sea at that point. He had been badly wounded during the invasion of Italy, Sicily, and then Salerno. He was hit when a German plane came over and strafed the deck, and just tore his leg up really bad. There was a good chance he wasn't ever going to get to sea again, and he worked his way back through months of therapy. He was determined to get his command, to make captain, and then ultimately ended up a vice admiral before he retired. And
Oh, wow.
he was an amazing soul. His family was integral in this, by the way. They found a bunch of recordings that he had done back in the 70s and 80s of him being interviewed by his son-in-law, who was also a Navy officer.
No way. What an incredible find that was.
Old cassette
they transferred
tapes.
all that over to CD now.
Oh, these old cassette tapes, we transferred it all across digitally, and now it's it's there for the ages.
Do you think that he ever regretted? At first, he probably regretted picking the Astoria just because of the massive delays that ship incurred. But I think at the end, very proud of the way it worked out, right?
He had the opportunity to pick from a couple of different ships. And the reason that he picked Astoria when he did, and not the other ship that was offered to him, was because the other was going to be a flagship, and he didn't want an admiral looking over his shoulder the whole time he was out at sea. so he did, he elected for this one, but then yes, they ran into all the construction problems that are in the book. The bearings wiping in the turbines, and it took them forever to get into the war. And so he just trained his crew and spent as much time as he could doing that.
You know what? This is why I brought my dad on board. You had a picture in your stuff. I'll post this picture up. It's USS Astoria. Now, the photographer, you could talk about that, because this was the first photo assignment he had, and you had so many photos from this guy that were just so many personal behind the scenes and war photos. Talk about him for a second.
Oh, poor Herman. Where to even start? He was he took that was actually, I think, the first photograph that he took with his official Navy issue Graflex speed graphic camera. Up until that point, he'd been using his own little 35 millimeter, and he only got the job. He didn't go to photographer school or anything with the Navy. He got the job because he had a proficiency and had a camera, frankly.
Yeah.
So he ends up just seasick until the world looks level. This is the second day they're in their shakedown cruise out at sea, and he is just chucking up everything but his shoes over the side of the ship. And they say, we wiped a bearing, go down there and take pictures of all this. And so, when he wasn't laying on the deck just trying to
Yeah.
trying to get his stomach at ease, he took photographs of those bearings. But he ended up, he has 29 photographs in the National Archives, and he took over 1,300 at sea.
Just
And
amazing.
he has the only surviving copy of most of them, many of which are in the book. The only reason those even exist is because he took a spare set. He made himself prints when they were coming home and snuck them out in his sea bag as he was leaving ship, and otherwise they wouldn't exist anymore. So
Really? Did he keep the negatives or just print?
no, just prints, but they were so high quality. When I'd go see him, we could scan the prints in together rather, and just take something that's 4x5 and blow it
Yeah.
up into this huge photograph and get amazing detail out of
The
it.
detail was incredible. Here is old Herman. Now, what I love about Herman, as you said, he wasn't rated as a photographer. He kind of got the job. I don't know how. Here, go take pictures. But because it was his hobby too, didn't he? I mean,
Correct. Yeah. He just liked photography, and so they're like, all
photography.
right, well, here, we'll order you a camera and let's go do it.
And so they gave him his own little office space where he could develop all the film. But because you can't walk in when you're developing film, you put that light on outside. He could just lock the door, turn that light on. He never had to go sleep in a hot rack or with all the other guys. He had his own big space.
He
What a
had his
cool
own
deal!
apartment aboard ship. He just basically
Yeah.
lived out of his, out of his dark room. And yeah, you're absolutely right. He could just stay in there, smoke, sleep, do whatever he wanted, have his buddies in. He had the
Out
best
of all
job in
the
the Navy.
stories in the book, I love that kid because he's like, yeah, I'll do it. And then he put combat photographer or something on his helmet, and nobody said jack to him because they all, hey, can you get a picture of me and send it to my mom? Put me on the cover of the Rolling Stone. What a great guy.
Oh, exactly. And it was a blessing and a curse. And he always talked about that because people would just come up to him all the time. Hey, can I get a photo for my girl, for my folks, whatever. People were hounding him for photographs all the time. But yeah, he milked it for what it was worth at the same time.
He did. He did. All right, Dad, Herman took this photo. Explain to us what we're looking at and how much damage, I mean, the bearings did. Now, what are we looking at right here? This looks like a shaft.
You have the shaft from the turbine, and you had a bearing that basically you're using a couple of thousandths of oil film that journal runs on and does not have contact with the babbitt of the journal. That is the idea of a bearing, and it will last forever. When you do not have oil there, it starts to wipe, and when it wipes, then it puts babbitt material all through the system, and then all the bearings will start wiping if you don't watch. So once you see any babbitt, you know you have a severe problem. I actually had that on my destroyer on the LP turbine, and we had to remove the turbine, haul it out, send it back to GE, and bring it back in and re-weld the deck. So I had experience actually in 70 some. I never remember all the dates, but
What ship was it on?
it was on the McCaffrey.
Oh, on the
I was chief
McCaffrey.
engineer, and that was 72 to 75, so 74.
So each one of these looks like there's a cover to it. So they take the cover off to do an inspection.
They're two halves of the bearing, and so you see the one half of the bearing has been lifted, and you can see that at the bottom. You see sort of a thing with a couple of holes, and that is half of the bearing. You're looking at the lower half of the bearing.
Wow. So this was a major delay for the Astoria, correct, Brent?
Yes, yeah, they actually had two of these. It had to do with the availability of materials, is everything I was able to read about it. So yes, this first one they didn't get to in time, and it really damaged the engine to the point that they had to cut the turbine and put it, take it out of the ship, laid them up for weeks in port, and then once they got back underway, after their shakedown, after they did the repair, they knew how to handle it better, but they suffered a second bearing failure on their way up the West Coast when they were getting ready to head out to Pearl Harbor, and they got laid up on the West Coast again, and they missed the Battle of Leyte Gulf as a result.
Oh, and you know what? Today is August 9th. So the anniversary 80 years ago today was when the original Astoria sank.
That's correct. Yeah, there were three American cruisers that were sunk in the Battle of Savo Island. We were 48 hours into the Guadalcanal landings, right? I mean, it was America's first offensive of the war.
Yeah.
And here's this cruiser force. The battleships were all sunk at Pearl, so here's this cruiser force supporting the landings, and the Japanese responded and sunk an Australian cruiser, the Canberra, and then three American cruisers, Astoria, Quincy, and Vincennes, and that was 80 years ago today. And that's the reason the ship was even named Astoria. The American public didn't know about it for months. The whole thing was kept out of the press until October, once there was some good news, progress in Guadalcanal that they could put on the front page. That's when they let everybody know that this had happened. And the next day they announced that there would be a new Astoria, Vincennes, and Quincy.
So hence vengeance.
Vengeance
They were
ships.
the
That's
vengeance,
yes.
Revenge.
Exactly. That's where the name of that came from, is the Vengeance ship program, and it extended to, like aircraft carriers too, right? I mean, we lost, the Yorktown and Lexington, some
Yeah.
Wasp and Hornet. They all had ships named after them too. Same program.
Keeps the Japanese spies busy wondering,
Wondered.
hey, I thought we
Wait,
sank that
I
thing.
thought we sunk that.
Yeah, yeah. Where'd that one come from? Well, which task force are we talking about today?
58 or 38? What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So they finally get it done. Dad, question for you that came up when I was reading the book. Can you what gives you the heads up that this bearing is about to fail? Is there any indication? High pressure, high temperature. Is there something in that section that's monitored that would allow you to shut that engine down to save it?
Normally, when you have a problem, you're going to have Babbitt that is in the basket, the lube oil basket. That is that or sound. Normally, I think in your case there was a sound. I had a sound on mine because it was the thrust bearing, and they have thrust bearings. I was reading up on it. They have thrust bearings in power plants that have been running for 100 years on that same several thousands of oil, and never have wiped, never had a problem. And in this case, I wanted to tell Brent, I'm really amazed at how he's able to blend all these people together and into a team that you can read. It just is beautiful to see all the different groups, the engineers, the aviation guys. They were really good and getting people picked up. I had never read anything about that. I didn't realize that that was the big thing to run out with their seaplanes off the cruises and pick up pilots
Oh yeah, right in the middle of the battle as well.
right in.
There. I think it's Yamamoto. When they went in and sank the Yamamoto, and you watch a pilot bails out, lands in the water, and this PBY comes right in, hits the water, skirts in. They grab the guy, yank him into the PBY, and off they go. And the deck gunners can't get their guns low enough to shoot at the PBY. And they were just pissed. They were amazed that right in the middle of the battle, that was a good representation of what those guys did, Tanner and them. So actually, all right, so let's go through. We got the captain. We got the XO, who sounds like he messed up, but well, gosh, how do we even do this in an hour? The ship the ship goes up to San Diego and gets repaired, or was it San Francisco?
It was at Mare Island. They came through San Diego. That's where they had the little mutiny of the guys that jumped ship, and then they worked their way up to Mare Island, San Francisco, Oakland area, and they were stuck there for a while. So Dyer had the opportunity to figure out, okay, where did this little mutiny come from? Which is something we haven't talked about, but it's certainly a separate story.
These are great. All right, so as we're going, I'm just going to hit, and I want vignettes. So talk about the mutiny, Lemon and all his boys.
Okay, so there's this guy, Rousseau Lemon. I tried to write him sympathetically. I was very hesitant on how to approach that. Of course, I never got to interview him. He passed away a long time ago. But he had been through everything. I mean, he was at Savo Island. He was on the first Astoria, what we just spoke of. He
Right.
saw his friends fall around him. He saw tremendous bloodshed around him, and he's got the best gig in the Navy. He's out at Key West. He's just on a little ship that's just training new officers and training people, and he's just riding it out. Got a new bride, got a kid on the way. He's just counting the days until he's out of the Navy, and he gets dragged back and pulled back to a ship with the same name as the one that was sunk out from under him, and now they're going to send him out to the Pacific again, and he's like, to heck with this.
Yeah.
And so he figured out how to game the system, and actually, I mean, this is something that a lot of guys were doing. Was you'd wait till your ship made its final port of call on the West Coast before it was headed out to Pearl, jump ship, and then you report in New Orleans. That was the word of mouth, was you go to New Orleans, and then you'll get a slap on the wrist, you'll get a cush assignment, and you'll end up out at Key West again. and that's what he was doing. He did it twice. He was on the USS Santa Fe first, and then assigned back to Astoria, and he did that same thing twice. And Dyer, of all people, said, "Nope, not on my watch. Nope, you're coming back." And
yeah, they drugged that guy all the way across country, all the way across the Pacific,
all the way
get back on the ship.
One guy, yeah, and you have to, not to give anything away, but you have to imagine, when he was first on board, here he's this salty veteran. He's been through combat. These new guys are just eating up every story that he has, and when he gets dragged back aboard ship months later, they've been through everything. They've been through the Philippines. They've been through hell. They've been through the Philippines, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and now he comes rolling back aboard, and they're like, "Hey,
where you been, jackass?"
Where you? Yeah, yeah. Sorry, sir. We don't know what happened to Lemon, sir. He just fell down the ladder, sir.
Hey, I think he got probably a couple code reds. I would bet
something.
I would bet he got a lot of spit in his food and a couple code reds.
But yeah, I mean, Captain Dyer really illustrated what was going. It was a racket that was going on, and it was Navy wide. I mean, ships on the East Coast were having to they were having to put 5% more people than required for the crew complement, because they knew by the time they swung through the Panama Canal at the West Coast, they would lose that 5%.
And you can't restrict them to ship. I mean, you get into port, you gotta let the guys go. Have one last hoorah.
Yeah, by and large. And he just played his P's and Q's, made sure that he didn't get into any trouble. He didn't lose any liberties, free to go. And then off he goes.
Yeah, that was an amazing. That was the best part of the story. Him right into the Admiralty and putting the 8th District or whatever down there in New Orleans under fire to get that guy back. He was a Marine at heart. He truly was. Here's a picture of Captain Dyer. Is that
yeah, Dyer's on the right. Yeah, and then that's
Armitage.
No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to look at that exact photo. That was his air defense officer and his gunnery officer.
Though Army.
No, he's not in that photo.
Oh, he's not. Okay.
No. But yeah, he has an interesting story too, right? He's the one that was at the con when they almost rammed the USS Indianapolis. Here's Spruance's flagship, a 4-star admiral, right? They grabbed Dyer out of his quarters when he was just going, to the head, frankly. And sir, you need to get up here. And he comes up, and here they are crossways crossing the T with Esperanza's flagship and almost darn near ran into them.
I can't remember. How did that happen? What was the gist behind that?
They were all the cruisers had just the day before had been shelling Iwo Jima, and so
Right.
they were rejoining the fast carrier task group. I'm sorry, the fast carrier task force. They were rejoining, and they were just in the process of taking their positions. And his XO just got it crossed up.
And he got relieved after all the stuff he had done for that ship. I understand Dyer lost confidence in him, but that was tough. That
I
was
mean,
tough.
yeah, it was tough to write about, honestly, because I mean, I do think that the exec did a lot of good for the ship and did a lot to make that crew.
Yeah.
Just, what are you going to do?
Well, here's a photograph. If you look at the number of carriers that are out there and the other ships, I mean, it's a beautiful photograph, but that was just a ton of steel out there. So you got the idea, Days of Steel Rain, from one of the guys who wrote in his diary about 3 days of steel rain.
He was talking about the shrapnel that was pelting their helmets. I mean, they put so much stuff up in the air anytime a Japanese plane would make an attack. And frankly, some of it was friendly fire too. I mean, that's something that doesn't get enough mention is blue on blue friendly fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was just so much stuff raining down at any given point in time that it was steel rain. And he said, yes, it rained steel for 3 days. And that's a title. That's
Yeah,
good.
it's a great, it really is, because nobody thinks about all of these. I'm showing a photograph of the ship
Hmm.
and you see these puffs of right above the ship. And what those are the shells blowing up, trying to get the aircraft that were attacking um, the different ships. And so you get the anti-aircraft rounds going off, and they have 5-inch shells going up towards.
They did. Yeah, the guys would say when when the 5-inch was going off, okay, it's another day at the office. Once the 40 millimeters started going off, all right, now it's getting serious. When the 20s would open up, that's when it's coming right at you. And those 5-inch dual purpose guns, they had a flaw in them in that uh, they were challenged to cutting off. They couldn't see the guys in the mount couldn't see what they were shooting at, and there wasn't a good system for cutting fire, and so they would track the plane down, get closer, keep firing, and those were the guns that ultimately caused some friendly fire casualties.
Yeah, didn't they get hit? Astoria got hit.
Story got hit, yeah, absolutely. A 5-inch round from well, a couple times, but from a neighboring ship hit the bridge armor, and Captain Dyer, his exec, Armitage, his gunnery, his gun boss, a bunch of guys got hit, and they were testing these experimental flak suits, and it was these things are pretty crazy. I have some pictures of it in the book, but it was just this early version of before Kevlar, obviously, just a flak suit that would take all that. And the reason they survived is because they were testing these suits. And a lot of the guys wouldn't wear their suits because too hot, got smelly. They'd been just dealing with them when they were down on shakedown.
Yeah.
So Dyer took his suit that had 13 distinct points where shrapnel had hit it and laid it at the front of the chow line for all the guys to see the next day. It's like the message is wear your suit.
Message received. Everybody had their suits on after that, wore their helmets.
Yep.
God, you know what? And because the ship was delayed, they also got extra time for gunnery practice. They were one of the best rated, the best gunners out there in the fleet, weren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, they got more practice time than just about anybody. I mean, they joked for a while they were the best ship not fighting a war while they were stuck safe stateside for so long. And as a result, they ended up shooting down more Japanese planes than any other ship that served in the fast carrier task force.
And look, there's you got a bunch of the Jap airplanes painted on the side of the bridge there.
Yep.
That's pretty dang cool. So they go out. What is their first battle that they get involved with?
With the sea, their very first battle was actually what's come to be known as Halsey's Typhoon, or Typhoon Cobra, but that's a post-war name. I didn't use it in the book, but it was the Typhoon of December 1944, where they were on their way to, yeah, right there. They were on their way to support the operations going on in the Philippines, and hit just the worst storm imaginable. The entire task force did. They lost 3 destroyers. Over 1,000 men were lost due to sea conditions. That's actually where the Cane Mutiny came from. That if you've ever read that story or seen that movie, that entire thing in the Cane Mutiny is based on that typhoon.
Well, because I remember reading it and making a note about this, because I go, it's just so cool. He pulls out the Bow Ditch American Practical Navigator book, and he's reading it, and he goes, winds to the side, blah, blah, blah. We got to turn souf. And
Backing winds, sir. Yeah, exactly. We need to go 180. Go south. Go south as quick as
and
possible.
he sends that to Halsey, and not until the next morning do they get cleared. Well, they can't refuel. The ships can't refuel. And I'm going to show this picture. If you're listening to the show, what I'm showing is a picture of this large cruiser, and it's actually about 42 degrees rolled over because the Typhoon has 115 knot winds blowing. So you can imagine the wind hitting the side of the ship and blowing this thing over at 45 degrees. That's when they say the ship will capsize, unrecoverable.
Yep.
And that's how 3 of the destroyers were lost. The wind actually blew the ship sideways. The water came into the stacks, and they just literally went under.
And that's it.
That was it. There was one officer who was standing on the bridge as the ship rolled. He just stepped right into the water, and the ship was gone. Maybe 9-10 guys survived or something crazy. It was horrible.
You remember when I was talking about ballasting as chief engineer? When you in that bad storm, if you haven't had a chance to refuel, you are supposed to ballast, and what you ballast with is salt water into your fuel tanks. And then after it's all over with and you're back in calm waters, you've got to use separators, oil water separators, to get all the water back out, because if you throw water in a boiler, then your boiler will quit, and then you have no steam, and you'll be back in the problem again. And as chief engineer, I resisted ballasting. I would never ballast. Now, you say, well, you take a chance of capsizing. Well, I was never in that rough of water. And so a discussion always with the captain was, Captain, I don't think the weather really means we should be ballasting for the problems we will have with boilers and electricity and steam afterwards, because it just takes too much time to get it out. If we have to go somewhere and do something else, we're really in trouble. So I was an anti-ballast, and I probably was, along with about 90% of the engineers. You hated to ballast, but if you had to in weather like that, you would ballast.
So in that hurricane, they did ballast the Astoria.
Yes, absolutely.
They ballasted the Astoria, but they didn't do it on the destroyers. But let me ask you this: if you ballast and you put that salt water in there to ballast it out, but you're low on fuel, how do you keep the power plants going? Are you able to run the separator when you're sucking the fuel out?
You can get to fuel. Yes, you can get to the fuel. You can have salt water.
Floats on top of the oil, or the oil is on top of the water?
Well, I think I was just
oil is on top of the water, right?
Should be on top.
Yeah.
So
boy, that was
you can get to the fuel.
So keep in mind that the destroyers were the ones that were vulnerable here, right? I mean, they're the ones that have very smaller capacity for fuel reserves. You know, cruisers, battleships, they had enough fuel, and they were trying to figure out how to spread fuel across the fleet. They even had other ships tried to send some across to destroyers, but they kept parting the fuel lines. But the destroyers are the ones that caught the worst of it.
Yeah. And then that where is it Armitage? No.
Went overboard.
Yeah, Armitage. Yeah, my Marine.
Okay, so it wasn't in that storm. It was in the next month. They hit another typhoon in January when they were in the South China Sea when they did that little incursion. Yeah, there's your Marine. Yeah, Gerard Armitage. Yeah, he's what an amazing character, and thank goodness he kept a memoir, because some of the best stories in that book come from him and from his records. I only got to meet him briefly before he passed, but I got to attend his service at Arlington National Cemetery. Just amazing. But yeah, they're in typhoon conditions again, desperate for refueling, trying to get fuel to some of these smaller ships. And one of the things those Cleveland class cruisers had was 20 millimeter guns up at the very, very bow. And you have to understand, I mean, you're talking about just a knife's edge of a bow on these cruisers,
Right.
and way up above the waterline. Well, one of those guns came loose, and here's this 20 millimeter mount just slewing back and forth. And in Dyer's, you need to go secure that mount. Yes, sir. So he leads a couple of guys up to a couple of his Marines. They're working the lifeline, working their way up to the very front of the ship to secure that 20 millimeter mount. And even with K-pot on, and the bow dips in the waves, goes completely underwater, comes back up. Two of the other guys are rolled up against the mount, and Armitage is gone. He's off the ship at that point. And they see him in the water in these heavy seas floating past. And here's a Marine story for you. As he's passing, he still salutes the colors from the water
In the storm.
in the storm. And they throw, that's a Marine for you. They throw a dye marker in the water. One of his buddies does. And he ended up getting picked up by a destroyer at the very tail end of the formation. They got him. Just a miracle.
How would you pick up a guy out in the water like that?
They'd go out on the fantail of the destroyers and just throw a line over. I mean, they just pure grunt work, pure muscle pulling the guy up. But my favorite part of that story is, here comes that destroyer, sidles up against Astoria the next day, and they start signaling with their lamp, "We have your Marine. What do you have in trade?" And they ransomed him back.
That was the ice cream.
Yeah, it was the ice cream. They're like, all right, we'll give him to you, but it's going to cost you 25 gallons of ice cream because we don't have an ice cream maker on our ship.
No, wait a minute. He's a Marine. They charge 15 gallons or something, right?
You're right. It was like our standard ransom is 25, but he's a Marine, so we'll give him to you for 20.
Yeah, I got a photo of the ship crashing.
Yeah, there you go.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's right in that time frame. That's looking down the bow of Astoria.
Yeah. Wow. Man, that's intense. And I do have a photograph of our Marine right here. He served combat time. Was it Guadalcanal?
Yeah,
Guadalcanal. Yeah.
He was with the First Marine Division. He came ashore on the day of the invasion, August 7th, 2 days ago, 80 years ago. 2 days ago, 80 years ago. Yes.
Wow. What I love is the relationship that he had with this fella, Tanner, the pilot.
Chuck
and
Tanner.
You could just imagine. So he's a lieutenant. Armitage is a Marine captain, same rank. Two JOs having a great old time, hanging out together. Probably, got a couple rides in the back of the Kingfisher. Let's see if I got a picture of the. Yeah, here it is. Actually, this is Tanner's last flight.
On that plane, yes.
Yeah.
That's right. He was going on a rescue mission. It's crazy to think, first of all, that they were launching planes off of a cruiser. When you think of a plane on an aircraft, or on a ship, you think of an aircraft carrier.
Right.
But here you are launching them off of catapults and then landing on the water and then using a crane to pick them up, bring them back aboard. They rescued a number of guys doing that. But yeah, anytime Tanner could stuff Armitage into the back of his plane under any justification, he's going to be a spotter, sir.
They went out and had fun. I know they had fun.
They had a good time. Yeah.
There's a great picture of the crane that would hoist it back up. They talk about a hangar deck, but I could not see where they would have a hangar deck for these things.
So in that photo you're looking at right now, if
Yeah.
you look at where, okay, center left, what that is, that's fuel storage. That's the aviation gas, the avgas,
Oh.
and that thing slides forward,
Hmm.
and they can actually lift a plane and drop it down into a hangar below decks, right below it.
Really?
Yes, but here's the problem: the Kingfisher didn't have collapsible wings. So the earlier planes, the SOC Seagulls and things like that, they could store them down below. But Astoria had Kingfishers, they couldn't fit them through the opening to the hangar deck, so they never used it. So they turned it into a basketball court.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, when you look, there's the ship going through, and the poor airplanes are on the back, and they
Uh-huh.
just got. I don't have that picture handy, but
They got
the
destroyed.
they were
Just,
destroyed.
yeah, and that was true of all of those ships that had those Kingfishers because they couldn't stow them down below, so they just tried to anchor them or brace them in any way they could. And those
Yeah,
planes, if they didn't wash overboard, they were just annihilated.
yeah. And the photos you had, I forgot to download the one. The wings crushed. It's hanging off the side of the catapult. It was a bad day for the
Mhm.
aviation side. Just Tanner, tell the story. Okay, here we go. He's going to go rescue these pilots from that were down off Yorktown, and so he takes off in his Kingfisher. There was another crew too. There was another Kingfisher crew as well, wasn't there?
There were two others. Yes, two other planes were launched from the USS Pasadena, twin sister cruiser, and all three of those planes went out, and they got on site to try to locate the pilots and the radiomen that were in the water. And it turns out that a submarine had already recovered these guys, rescued them. So they're
Oh,
like, oh, okay, well, we got our guys back, we're good. But they started heading back, and the two Pasadena planes were very low on fuel. They hadn't been fueled properly for the mission for whatever reason. That's kind of lost to the ages, but it says that. So they're on their way back to the entire task force, and the Pasadena guys are like, we're out of fuel, we have to land, and so they set their planes down on the water. So Tanner set down with them to just be there and stay with them. He didn't fly all the way back, even though he could have, and
it would have been a night landing as well for him.
it would have been a night landing, which was very uncommon, very unheard of at that point. So, they sat down, and immediately, night falls, and then one of the Pasadena planes in heavy waves ends up. The guys try to get out of the plane. It capsized, and they ended up in a raft, and they drifted over the horizon, and Tanner never saw him again. So before long, he's out there by himself. I mean, he is truly one man on the ocean by himself, and
Yeah.
the fast carrier task force has moved away at that point because they had to move. So what does he do? What are his options? He makes the decision, I've only got one shot. I've got a map, I can figure things out, I can do dead reckoning, and decides he has enough fuel to try to get himself over Luzon in the Philippines, and gets airborne after a couple of tries. And
Oh, that builds the great tension. Where did you get the information about the shotgun shells? And
in his after action report, he had all that detail in there. But yeah, he
talk
gets
about that. That was amazing.
he gets over Luzon. He thinks, because he's in a heavy cloud, he can't see the ground. He assumes he's over land just because of his compass and his map. He's like, all right, I think I'm close, and I'm on 99.9% empty, and then this plane's about to stop working, and he just jumps out of the aircraft. He he parachuted out, and then I leave the reader hanging. We're giving stuff away, but I'll leave the reader hanging for 3 chapters until we find out what happened to him, and he pops
Oh,
up.
it's fantastic. It is fantastic. But the drama building up to start the engine, he had the shotgun shells, right?
Yes, yes. That was an emergency way to turn that engine over and get it started.
Yeah, and boom,
Won't start, and he's down to his last
boom.
one. Right, he's literally down to his last shell, and turns it. Boom! It turns over. He gets
Oh,
airborne, but even then, okay, great. I've got a flyable airplane for a little bit. Now let's get it someplace where I can actually get out of it.
and not Japanese controlled area,
and not
and
yeah,
not
exactly right.
and not on an island with cannibals and whatever. Or well, Japanese cannibals, you're gonna cut your liver out and eat it while you're alive. Um, they
Yeah,
were not
it's
kind to
amazing
airmen.
he survived that whole experience. And then, here he shows up on the ship months later. They've written him off as dead. They've been to Iwo Jima by that point. And then they get back into Anchorage, and here's Tanner again. He's back.
Yeah, oh, he's a fantastic character. I love that guy, and Armitage as well. Dad, did you guys ever have to pick a man overboard? Somebody fall off a ship, and you guys had to do it?
No, luckily we did the drill a number of times, but we never put anybody in the water to do it, to bring them out.
There was a Marine back in 90, I want to say it was 1992. I was at Cherry Point, so 92, 93 time frame, and they were on exercise with the Turks, and the guy fell off an aircraft carrier. A jet turn blast blew him off. He survived the fall. Now he's sitting in the water. It's nighttime, and the carrier's sailing off. Airplanes are still coming in, landing on the carrier. Everybody's gone. He's yelling, nothing. So he does his training, right? Takes his boots off, takes his trousers off, ties the legs together, and he makes a Mae West, basically, right? You get it wet, and then you throw it over your head, stick your head in between the legs that you have tied off, and it makes like a Mae West. He floated for 2 or 3 days, and a Turkish, had to deal with sharks, and the whole 9 yards. A Turkish fishing trawler comes along, picks this kid up, and he's so happy. But then they don't speak English, and they're like, "Hey man, we caught you. Get to work." And they made him work for like 2 months on the boat before they came back, right before they got their catch. And they had already had a funeral for the kid. So when he got back, they had to transport him to a couple of different towns to finally get to one that had a priest that could speak English. They got on a phone. He calls his dad. He goes, collect phone call from your son. And the guy's like, "You sick son of a bitch," hangs up the phone. He calls back, Dad, don't hang up. It's me. Oh, man. Great story. The kid survived. But anyway, sorry, I digress.
No, that's amazing.
You guys have to do these drills, and they obviously were good at picking the guys up. But there was some situations after the typhoon that they rescued some people, but they just never found anybody else. Horrible. But I do have a photo. It's Tanner, and who's the other guy?
Okay, so the other guy is
Guy you
from
rescued.
USS Bunker Hill, and his name is His name is Walter Gogol. And what's funny, you can't see it at this resolution, but if you were to zoom in real close, you would be able to see on his Mae West, it is Barney Google. So that was the joke for him. But he was he was a Corsair pilot, and was shot down. And yeah, one of the guys they retrieved. Astoria, their pilots, Tanner, Combe, Newman, those guys picked up a bunch of guys. They did the first and maybe only surface rescue from the inland sea of Japan, which would have been the equivalent at the time of a Japanese plane landing in the Hudson River off of Manhattan and fishing guys out of it. And they did it under fire from shore, from the water. These guys, they didn't have any guns, they just land on the water in this kingfisher, this goonie bird, and throw a rope ladder down and try to get a guy who's been in the water for a long time and is exhausted, help him get in the plane under fire and take off.
Now, were there two people normally flying in the plane, or just the pilot?
Depended. A kingfisher would comfortably seat two, and you'd have a radio man in the back if you were doing like aerial spotting for gunnery exercises or something. But on rescue missions, often they would just send just the pilot solo, because then they'd grab the guy and throw him in the back. It was a very short-lived concept because helicopters were on the horizon, just a year or so away. So it was kind of unique in 1945 to have these planes.
That capability, yeah.
Yeah, and they had, they'd been designed pre-radar for for reconnaissance, for spotting, those kind of things. Well, a lot of that was obsolete with the developments in radar, but we had a gap to fill, and there's a back seat, so let's throw a guy in it.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Now, when they were on the front line fighting the Japanese, they would retreat to, what was the name of that island?
Ulithi?
Ulithi.
Yeah, Ulithi was the anchorage in late 1944. Yes.
So there was the picture of the smoker. I can't remember. Was the smoker there?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they'd go back to Anchorage in between operations. They'd be at sea for weeks, even months at a time, and then they'd go back and blow a little steam. And guys had a score to settle with each other. Then, all right, let's set up a boxing ring and let them go at it in a way that that is officially sanctioned.
But you think you're safe. You're kind of behind the lines. You think you're safe, but they were showing movies on the deck one night, and then this happened.
Yeah, that's USS Randolph.
Yeah.
They were just getting ready to get underway for Okinawa, and here they are. They're all just watching movies, just doing their thing, and there weren't light restrictions, obviously, with movies. Everybody felt they were pretty invulnerable there at Ulithi, and this mission actually originated from Japan. Long range planes flew out to Ulithi, and I can't remember the numbers. I think it was like 24 planes that were sent, and only 2 actually made the mission. But yeah, one of them crashed into the back of the Randolph and knocked her out for over a month.
Yeah, that's horrible. So that was March 11th.
That's right.
That the Hancock got hit, or no, I mean the Randolph got hit.
Mitchell, I hit 10% battery here, so
you should still be okay.
Okay.
If you don't, we'll leave it going here. If not, we'll take that off, and you can just use the speaker. Here's a great shot. So they went to Iwo Jima. How long did they provide support for the Marines on Iwo Jima there?
2 days. The thing with Iwo Jima for the naval side of things was you ran out of shells, and so ships had to come off the line to resupply. And resupplying ammunition at sea was a brand new thing at this point. It was barely tested, tried. I mean, they were literally days into it. So you've got the likes of even the USS Texas, which had just shot herself empty and was coming off the line. And actually, I don't think it's in there, but Herman took a picture of the Texas coming across her bow as they relieved that station. So here come the fresh reserves from the fast carrier group, and then they shot themselves empty, and that's to the tune of 2,000 6-inch shells main battery, and 1,500 to 2,000 of the 5-inch secondary battery. Shot everything they had, including star shells. At night. It was honestly the biggest impact they made for the Marines wasn't so much the actual shells. It was the illumination. It was being able to fire something up overnight and keep illumination up where the Marines could see what was coming at them, what they were doing. That was the biggest role they played, and they did it for almost 2 days. But they ended up also fighting off a major counterattack that the Japanese had done. And by the time they left, the ship was floating higher because it's completely, all those rounds are gone, completely empty.
Now, I saw a photo with all the rounds stacked. Did they save all that brass?
Yeah, they saved all the brass and would transfer that back across to the ammunition ships.
Did the guys ever make any? Right behind me, you can barely see. I've got some World War I shell art. Did the guys ever make shell art and bring that back?
I don't think so. I'm very familiar with World War I shell art. I've seen some of that, but I don't know of any instances with that here. I think it was just transfer it back across because brass is a scarce commodity.
Yeah. I wondered, but well, they probably didn't have. They were on duty, on call, all the time.
Yeah.
In terms of being on alert for the airplanes and stuff like that.
Days at general quarters where you were taking, you were getting rations at your station, and maybe you had one guy that would run down and grab you all some sandwiches or something, and that was pretty much it. They slept at their stations. There's pictures of them actually sleeping at general quarters.
Yeah, I want to go through some of these photographs because they're just incredible. There's a smoke ring. So what are they shooting off?
That was taken from Astoria by Herman, and that is USS Pasadena, the ship I mentioned earlier, twin sister.
Right.
They look exactly alike, and they are just in formation. Just the two of them, make one pass at the island, turn around, make a pass, come in the other direction. That's their 6-inch main battery.
Now, is that the Indianapolis behind it?
No,
Out
that's
there.
in the background. That's USS Boston.
Okay. And of course, I showed this photograph earlier of all the aircraft. Where was this taken? Do you remember?
That's Ulithi. And
Sorry.
I mean, just imagine, just think, October of 1942. You've got Enterprise, USS Enterprise, alone in the Pacific, right? The only surviving American carrier that is still in theater.
Mhm.
You had Saratoga, but she was in port being repaired. So they had a sign on the deck that said, Enterprise versus Japan, which I love. And now here you are a little over 2 years later, and we're fielding 17, 18 aircraft carriers at a time, fleet
Right.
aircraft carriers. In addition, there's the smaller ones that are replenishing the planes that are taking them out there. But that's the difference in strength that could be brought to bear.
Oh man. Well, tell you what, this is the flak that you see overhead that these guys are fighting with. Is that? Yeah, that's the Astoria right there. No, is that
Yes. Yeah, that's Astoria.
Pasadena?
Yeah,
That
that's
is a
Astoria
great shot
also.
right
Yeah, that's taken from USS Essex, and that is Ticonderoga in the background. But yeah, that's Astoria in the middle of that shot.
there.
She's been repainted, so they figured out after a while that their main threat came from the sky, not from the surface. So they took those disruptive camouflage measures, stopped using them, and instead painted their ships dark blue so they matched the sea.
Smart. Oh, that was the Indianapolis.
Yes.
I had pulled that up. This shot just kills me. So 42 degrees, just amazing.
And just consider what you're looking at there. That ship is 2 football fields long.
Yeah. I mean, guys walking on the side of the walls to get into. Well, you're going to get chow, that's for sure. Kind of like the old Edmund Fitzgerald song, "Too rough to
Right.
feed you, boys."
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, they hung bottles of water with lime juice from the ceiling just because that was from the overhead. Sorry, I'm not using my nautical terminology, but if the ship rolls through the turn, that's the only way to keep it from pouring out. And you just go by and drink from that.
Jeez.
And
Let's see
you're
what's.
walking on the bulkhead as much as you're walking on the deck.
And that's that disruptive camouflage you were talking about. She's pretty right there.
Yes, it's really, really nice. That's what they were using in 43, 44. And it was mostly for surface threats.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to hide the ship per se, but if, a submarine periscope sees it, that disruptive measure keeps you from knowing its heading and direction so you can't vector toward it.
Huh.
But then
What if
by
that actually
45,
worked?
they yeah, well, they used it in World War One too, so I guess it did.
Yeah. Well, some things just carry over half the time.
True.
That's the Indianapolis on the bottom left. And if
Yes,
you're looking at this
Indianapolis
photo,
and go ahead.
oh, just gorgeous. Herman did a great job with the clouds and the rays of light coming through here.
They're headed to
Now,
Okinawa. They were in their worst combat 3 days after that and had no idea what they were headed into.
that's it. So here we go. I've got a bunch of photographs of battle that Herman had taken, and I'll let you go ahead and talk through some of these.
Okay,
To be sitting across from those guys watching the destruction must have been just horrible to morale, knowing your buddies over there were getting swacked.
this one in particular is interesting because that destroyer you see is USS
Mhm.
Halsey Powell, which was the destroyer that pulled Armitage out of the water. And so
Right.
here he is at his 20 millimeter gun, firing at a Japanese plane that just glanced off of the Hancock and hit both ships. And he's realizing that these are the guys that saved him. Those are the guys that ransomed him back to the Astoria for ice cream. And now he's watching them take a kamikaze hit.
Did that ship sink?
No, they stayed afloat, but there was of course loss of life.
Yeah. Jeez. And this one is incredible shot. You look at the rounds hitting the water, and the airplane is flying towards the carrier. Herman took this shot. and you can see right to the right of the aircraft carrier the lone Japanese Zero going for it. I don't remember if that made it to the carrier or not. Was
The
it right
plane,
after this one? Yeah.
okay, yeah, go back to that last one. The plane actually didn't hit, but what did hit was 5-inch rounds. This is one of those instances. The Japanese got really good at flying very low and getting American ships to shoot into each other. And so that's USS Enterprise, and she was hit right after that photograph by friendly fire because they were tracking the plane.
Yeah. Yeah. And he actually captured the Japanese plane breaking up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a Judy. Yeah, but right between Astoria and Essex on its way down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
can't imagine
is
how
that,
much stuff was overhead.
oh God, look at all the flak that's over top. Is that Enterprise right there?
It's Enterprise also, yeah. And they brought a plane down
So
short.
all those little dots are all the flak bursts that are they're trying to nail that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the splash or the explosion off the
Yeah, because you've
fan.
got the plane and the bomb detonating when it hit the water.
Yeah. I mean, that's taller than the ship.
Yeah, the plume is over 100 feet high.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's just amazing. And horrible shot here because they did get a hit.
That is Enterprise. That is actually her final day in action in World War II. That was, yeah, she was hit by a kamikaze on the forward elevator, and it's hard to see in that photo, but at the top right, the dark black part up at the upper right, that's actually her elevator. And
Oh, that's the elevator door getting blown up.
The elevator itself was blown 400 feet in the air by the impact, and then it landed back in place, sort of, on the deck, and that was Enterprise's last day.
Wow.
Of the war.
Well, I think we have there's some photographs. They found her, and just as majestic on the bottom of the ocean as she was up top fighting. This is, to me, I mean, you can see the meatballs. The elevator's ripped off the back, big hole on the left wing, and that guy's going in. That did not make it into a ship. That crashed.
Correct. That was
the
actually
ocean.
taken the same day as the last photo you showed. That's Astoria in the background, and you can see all the smoke coming off the back of Astoria because of all of the anti-aircraft that they're throwing up there. You know, all the fire that they're doing. This is a Japanese plane that she dropped. It was taken from USS Essex, and she brought it down just short.
Wow.
The guys from Astoria were very proud of the fact that Essex had been hit in November off of Leyte Gulf, November 44. And once Astoria took duty as primary guardian over USS Essex, she was never hit again.
Wow. Nice. That just goes to talk about how those drills paid off, right? Train
Exactly.
like you fight like you trained. Yeah. Hey, we lost my dad. I think a little technical difficulties there. Maybe
he said he was at 10%, so he may have dropped.
Yeah, I think he dropped. Well, I tell you what, I've hit in an hour and 3 minutes. We kind of talked a little bit about it. There were some questions, and I thought this was a great one. Any talk of a miniseries like Band of Brothers?
Oh boy, I tell you
they
what.
made Greyhound. Steven Spielberg made Greyhound, and
Greyhound was a great film. I agree. It's also a different part of the war, right? It's Atlantic convoy duty, and now we're talking Pacific here. I'll be honest. I wrote this story very much cognizant of Band of Brothers in style. One of the things I loved about the series was that every episode kind of had a different main character. You focused on the medic, Eugene Rowe. You had a different episode that focused on Carwood Lipton, for sergeant. They went through all the different characters. I tried to write the same way. Have something that's focused around Herman Schnipper, the photographer, something that's focused around Chuck Tanner, the pilot, the captain, obviously George Dyer. So I have an agent. We're shopping it. We're looking at Film and Dramatic, and oh boy, it's not even about the money. I'd love to see Chuck Tanner fly a kingfisher and pick somebody up off the surface of the ocean is what I want to see.
And not CGI either. I mean, we got to find one, build it,
You gotta find
find one, rebuild it. I'm sure Spielberg can make that happen. And if
Right.
there's anybody that can talk to Spielberg, it's Freddie Joe Farnsworth. Freddie Joe, and he worked for the company with Dale Dye that they did all the training for the actors in
Yep.
Band of Brothers in the Pacific. And Freddie's a good friend and
Oh, I
freaking
remember
great
Dale
American.
Dye's work back to Platoon. Man, he's been around forever doing that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if they ate my liver, they'd be drunk. Good evening, Taco. Megan, how are you? And Susan Keating owns Soldier of Fortune, so maybe we can work up something to write up on Soldier of Fortune magazine to get your stuff out there. Because, folks, I kid you not, buy this book, Days of Steel Rain. I can't even remember how we met. I don't remember how we met.
I reached out to you. I was watching your podcasts. I came across your stuff and was like, holy cow. And
well, you sent me your book, and I literally had a stack. I had like 5 books to read for interviews that were coming up. And so my dad always bugs me. Hey, do you have any good books to read? And I'm like, yeah. And my dad was like, son, that book was amazing. So I'm like, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. And then I remember telling you, I will read this. And I literally picked it up. I started reading it and I read it in 2 days. It was awesome. If I could tell you anything, if they make this a miniseries, it would not only focus on the different campaigns well, because I mean, kind of like they did Market Garden or D-Day and then Market Garden, kind of the same deal. They do the beginning, the origins, the trip over, Iwo Jima, the typhoon.
Mm-hmm.
That typhoon, how frustrating that must have been for him to be sitting there going, turn 180, Admiral, with the lights or whatever, go 180, get going back this way. And they just ignored him. Did they ever give him the attaboy that he deserved?
At the end of the story, after Dyer has left the ship and he's back in Washington, he's got his promotion. He's now, an admiral. He runs into, after the war's over, he runs into Halsey. I can't remember where, but somewhere in there. And he runs into him in the hallway, and Halsey looks at him and in perfect Halsey fashion says, "Wouldn't you have been just the son of a bitch that had the right course?"
Rampage. That was his call
Rampage.
sign.
Yeah, exactly. Rampage. Yeah. And at least he acknowledged it.
That's cool. Well, what do they kind of crapped on him with his call sign the first time. What was his?
Oh yeah. When they were first headed out to the Pacific, he must have had some beef. There must have been something with the senior officer in charge of the other cruiser they were assigned with. He made his call sign low life.
Yeah.
it was calling Dyer low life the whole way out there. And then they get to Pearl, and the other 2 ships they're with had far more deserters or people who missed sailing than Astoria did. And the admiral there just absolutely blasted the other ship's captains, like, he has all his guys. Where are yours?
Rampage.
I
like
love it.
Ramrod. Call me Ramrod. You ever see Super Troopers?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're Team Ramrod. Rampage. I love that. Hey, we got my dad back. Let me see if audio is working. I turned him off because we're getting the echo feed. Dad, you can hear us. We see you, but you've got an echo feed going that's going to interrupt here.
Sorry to drop off.
Oh, no, there you are. Okay, go ahead and just take your headset off.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, turn the switch on the bottom off.
On the...
Yep. I'll mute you while we're doing that. Matt Dishner just picked up a copy. Outstanding. Matt, you really will like this book a lot. If you guys have any family members that were Navy, or historians, or just like
Or
it.
Marines. Plenty of Marines in that book.
Or yeah, a lot of Marine stuff in this thing. And what I liked about your book, because sometimes just stats and stuff just bore the living crap out of me, and you can't make it through. This was the human side of it, with woven into the battle stuff, which brought it to life. That's what I loved about it. You literally put the people right there in the action on the ship, feeling the stuff pelting them. It was well done, sir. And is this the first book you've ever written?
Yes, it is. And thank you very much. Yeah,
God.
it's first, not going to be the last. Working on a book about Guadalcanal right now. But yeah, my favorite, if I have to plug it, my favorite little Marine story and joke in there is wait for baby, you dirty SOBs. And
Oh yeah.
for anybody, I'm not going to give that joke away, but it's set up early on, and then you go through the whole story. You go through the Tanner and Armitage stuff, their friendship, and then that pull the trigger on that joke, and you didn't wait for
Talk about the
baby.
cartoonists.
Oh, okay. Joe Amon was just a he was a cop from upstate New York, and he was a very talented cartoonist, and he just started drawing photographs, or I'm sorry, drawing pictures, and came up with this character. They came up with this guy. They basically gave him free reign. They said, okay, you're good at what you do. Let's have a ship's newspaper. Let's put some stuff in it.
Hey,
And
the chaplain got him to do that,
the
right?
chaplain
Talked the
of all
captain into letting
people
him do that.
got him to do it. Yeah, the chaplain got him to do it, and he came up with this character named Joey Fubar, which anybody
Fubar.
yeah, the polite version is fouled up beyond all recognition, right?
Right.
And Joey Fubar was the chief's problem child who got into trouble at every corner, and so every single day had a new Fubar. It got very popular. It went beyond just the four walls of the ship, up to the point that even the likes of Spruance wanted their daily Fubar, and so they're having to figure out how to send these ships newspapers over because of this guy's cartoons about this foul up sailor.
Except for when Joey shot down the Japanese airplane, and he was like the man. That I love that cartoon.
It was very Charlie Brown. It was just day after day of him screwing up, things going bad, and then they had their first day in action. They dropped 3 planes that were diving on Essex, kept everything off of Essex that day. It was their moment. It was the first moment that they had, and it was fantastic. They kept a lot of guys alive. And and then the next day there's Joey Fubar, giving a punch to the Japanese, going, today I'm a man. three planes, USS Essex. So.
Oh man, that is just an awesome story. Well, all these little vignettes and all the stories, we can't even. I think if we had a 2-hour tell all, we could cover everything. Needless to say, I don't want to do that because I don't want to ruin the book. But I highly advise everybody, if you got somebody like my dad, when I handed it off to my dad read it and he's like, son, this is a great book. Oh my gosh. And then he gets into the technical stuff about the ball bearings and, about this and that. And I'm just going, well, I haven't read the book yet, Dad. Let me read the book. But you did a good job, because when you took the ball bearings and the technical aspects of what you could feel the frustration. I could feel the frustration for Dyer, being pissed off about the ship not working. This is your one chance to get into the war, and you're being hamstrung by guys, in the shipyard, not coming to work. Screw you guys. We're not going to come to work. Wait a minute. We're fighting for you, and you guys are going to go on strike.
Yeah.
Just all that kind of stuff. I would have gotten a bunch of Marines. I would have got Armitage and a bunch of M1s off the ship and gone in there and start headbutting these guys. But yeah, you can't do that. The life, it really took you back into 1943, 44, where you could feel the years of the war and the drain on all of us as a country, with the deaths and different things. You really could feel that, and you could feel the strain building up for the new kids that were 17, 18 years old, brand new sailors on this ship just out of school, where Armitage Army went up there and grabbed all these guys out of basic training. I mean, he did a fantastic job pulling the complement of the crew together when you think about it, with what he had.
the guy who learned about his brother's death from Life magazine. I mean,
Oh,
I can never get past that story. That's just amazing to me.
tell it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's early in the book. One of the guys, Fred Lind, he was a fire controlman on the ship, and he was just working at a Kodak plant doing his duty stateside. His brother was a Marine and was over in Guadalcanal. And the same night that they got a telegram for informing the family of his brother's being killed in action, they saw it first in Life magazine. I still have the photograph. You go through the pages and there's this cemetery that's just a makeshift cemetery on the island, and it's showing row after row of crosses, and right there in the foreground it says P.F. Lind, and
that was the only one that you could see the name.
that's the only one you can see, and it was his brother, and his mom saw that first, and just you can imagine.
Yeah. Well, been there, done that. I know my sister died when she was 19 and found out about it from the radio before my parents could get to us or get to me down in college. But, that horrible way to find out your loved one's dead, especially in that time. Oh, well. So we've got that story. We've got the Lemon story, the guy that AWOL the whole time.
Lemon's a great story. Yeah, I love the guy a little bit. I know, he's the guy that you just want to hate, but
I think he made up for it at the end.
He made up for it. He came back and he pulled his weight, and basically Dyer said, you know what? Because he kept asking, please transfer me off the ship.
Yeah.
This is miserable. And Dyer's like, I'm pleased as punch at what they're doing to you. And you're right where you need to be. And you know what? As soon as you earn your stripes, literally, they'll accept you. And they eventually did.
Yeah, he did. He did a good comeback tour at the end. Dwyer, whatever happened to Army and Armitage? Do you know the rest of their careers? Did the Marine go on to serve the rest of the time? Do we have?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about it a little bit at the end of the book. Armitage, for sure. I mean, he stayed in the Marine Corps, and he ended up. Gosh, you're gonna test me here. He ended up leaving as a colonel. He served in Korea, and was a battalion commander there, I believe. Was very decorated. He had an incredible career. Tanner ended up flying helicopters. That guy, he was half crazy, I think, which was why I love him. He's an Alaskan bush pilot at heart. Here he goes from flying planes that land on the water to try to fly them back to cruisers, and ends up being a test pilot, the early stuff with helicopters. And he crashed a couple of those, and they fished him out in the Arctic waters, but he ended up being okay too.
Yeah, I like him.
And like you said, Dyer ended up, he retired as a vice admiral. Probably would have gone higher if he hadn't started having strokes. But he had a very good run writing books. He actually wrote a number of memoirs and biographies of other people in the Navy. He has a number of books published under his name.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I have to, probably out of print. I mean, can you find any of these?
Oh, yeah, they're all U.S. Naval Institute, Navy Press kind of stuff.
Well, if anybody has any questions for Brent Jones or my dad, John Bell, feel free to pop them up in the comment section, and we'll take it real quick. Otherwise, we'll start looking at packing this thing up. Anything else you want to talk about? Your new book for Guadalcanal, is it Navy or Marines?
Both. It's going to be a cruiser story also. It's actually the first Astoria.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the one that was sunk at Guadalcanal. The thing about that ship that's really interesting is it was the last ship to visit Japan before World War II broke out. They took the ashes of the Japanese ambassador Hiroshi Saito home when he died in office in not in office, but in Washington in 1939. And so it made all the newspapers, it made all the magazines. It was a huge deal. It was one kind of last ditch effort for peace before war, because Saito was very Western. He loved baseball games and smoked cigarettes, and he loved Americans. He was probably the most pro-American Japanese ambassador that they could have had at the time. And then when he
Mm.
passed, I mean, honestly, he might have been able to keep us out of war. But Astoria took his ashes back, and it was a huge celebration. And there's amazing photographs. It was well received, over in Yokohama, and all the Astoria guys, they had port call, and they just went out and had a blast, had fun in Japan, and that was it. That was the last ship to go.
Oh,
And
wow.
then the same Japanese ships that gave them a 21 gun salute when they arrived were the same ones that blasted them out of the water at Savo Island.
Jeez. Jeff Bolton, good buddy of mine. He's in media, does great audio for books. If you're looking, have you done an audio? Is it on Audible?
It is audio. I honestly don't know about Audible off the top of my head, but there is absolutely an audio version. The guy who did the audio for it played a Borg on Star Trek, of all things.
Really?
Yeah, he's a voice actor. He does a lot of stuff for video games and for books. But yeah, I contacted him. He's super funny. But yes, it has been recorded on audio.
Oh, well, you got a good voice too. Yeah, you could do it. My mom, Brent, did you research in the Navy archives in DC? Did you spend a lot of time up there?
Absolutely. I was fortunate that I was doing a lot of business in the East Coast of DC and New York, New Jersey, Boston. That's what allowed me to get in contact with a bunch of these folks. But yes, I've spent many days in the National Archives, and a lot of the photographs and records that I have were scanned in the National Archives in College Park, Maryland.
Oh, wow. Jeff, also thinking from Brent on the then and now, what looks like coming of what it looks like the coming Pacific War. I think he's referring to China and the Spratly Islands and some of the stuff
Lordy.
going on out there.
Yeah. Well, I have a very strict policy of staying out of politics on things, but I certainly am keeping my eye on everything that's going on in Taiwan and acutely aware of the Spratlys and all that. Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be ugly. A lot of sailors are going to go, that's not such an easy job when you're getting hit with anti-ship missiles. No. Well, is there anything else that you want to pass on, or you have a favorite charity that you like? Oh, Tom Clancy. I meant to ask, are you a big Tom Clancy fan? Who was the guy that you tried to emulate, or do you enjoy the most?
Oh gosh, I grew up on Tom Clancy. Yes, I've read. I think what Red Storm Rising was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Of course, Hunt for Red October. I've read a lot of his stuff, all the Jack Ryan things. I don't know that I try to emulate anybody's style so much. I loved Stephen Ambrose, but I love what they did for the screen with Band of Brothers, and I really tried to stay visual when I was thinking about, writing. I really tried to write it for what's going on in your head, as opposed to just date and time and here's the map and here's the place. That can get old real quick.
How about Clive Cussler? Did you ever get into him?
Love Clive Cussler. Yeah, we grew up on him too. Raise the Titanic.
That was the first book I ever bought.
That was so great. That was so great. And then of course, one of my absolute heroes, Robert Ballard, located the Titanic. I remember when he did it, and of course the ship was broken in half, and it immediately invalidated the whole concept of raising the Titanic. But it still remains it's a great book, and it's a fun movie too.
Dirk Pitt. So when
Dirk Pitt, yeah,
as the bow of the Titanic's coming out of the water, and it raises the Titanic, and the bow is coming out of the water. Yeah. I say, I was, cutting grass, $2.50 a lawn or whatever. I think I paid, $1.25 for that book. But I wasn't into reading. I just bought it because I was fascinated by the Titanic, and I just liked the idea of they were able to raise it.
They were able to raise it. Oh, I love it.
I bought the book. I was, 11, 12 years old. I bought the book at the PX, but I never read it until, I was in 7th or 8th grade. I got into reading, and by the time high school, I was reading 2-3 novels a week. Plus, I went to a boarding school, so there wasn't a lot to do. No TV. You lived through all this stuff. Zach, thanks for doing the show. I tell you what, Zach, you really will enjoy this, man. It truly is Band of Brothers on the Ocean. And I think Stephen or Hanks tried to do that with Greyhound, kind of build the tension, that whole escort duty deal. This, though, would be a mini series because you're tracking all the folks. That's what I love about the
I
story.
liked Greyhound. I read the book. It was called the Good Shepherd, I believe, or something like that. But it's singularly focused around the commanding officer of the destroyer.
Mhm.
It is very much a character study, and a lot of books either go with a battle or they go with one veteran's experience, and it's rare to get an ensemble piece that
Mhm.
has a unit, if you will, like Easy Company, 101st. But having the ability to tell an ensemble work like this and have different perspectives of guys that just served by each other on the same ship and went through the same stuff together, it was fun. It was really fun to write that,
Well, have
and
you?
I think people would enjoy it.
How long has it been out now?
A year. It's in its second print. We just went to trade paperback, so it's been out for a year now.
Wow! And how's it doing? Good reception. Win some awards.
It's hard to say all that stuff. It was some of that with 2021 with COVID. There was so much that got put on the shelf. I mean, just even to keep it local, like the Texas Book Festival didn't happen in 2021, and so all of the books from 21 are being lumped into 22. So ask me that in November, I guess.
Yeah, well,
But
I tell you
we
what,
are shopping film and dramatic, so knock on wood.
yeah, there's got to be somebody out there that is into this. You know what? Pete Barnett. I know a guy named Pete Barnett. He's a Marine, and he works out there in Hollywood. They did. He was one of the producers on not Escobar. What was the? Yeah, I guess it was Narco.
Oh
On
yeah,
Narco.
yeah.
Yeah. So I have to get you hooked up with him because this is something that needs to be out there.
Well, you said you also have a Gary Sinise connection, so let's talk about some of that offline.
Oh, geez. If we can get it over to Gary, I know the person to hook you up. Dad, is there anything you want to talk about? Anything saved rounds?
No, not at this point. Thank you.
John, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being in this time with you and listening to you and hearing your perspective. I hope I got it right from the engineer's perspective.
Oh, you did, and really amazingly well.
Thank you, sir.
I had a couple of things I was going to get into in engineering and some of the engineering, naval engineering aspects. But hey, your book is on its own. You don't need any kind of thing like that. You had a wonderful book there.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful book.
Well, your first ship was a World War II destroyer, right?
No, it was a DE. It was the John R. Perry in Key West.
Destroyer escort.
Destroyer escort.
But
wasn't that a World War II build?
No, it was brand new.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was one of the new ones. They built 4 of them, and those 4 stayed actually out in the Philippines for a while, and the Philippines Navy bought them. And so I don't know if they're still running or not, but I can't.
Razor blades.
It should be, but they had Fairbanks Morse, 4 Fairbanks Morse, so they sounded like the submarines, and we kept getting asked, where were you at a certain time in a certain place? And they would think we were a submarine, and they wanted to know why we were there. So that would come up once in a while.
Hey, my grandfather talked about the bathrooms on the ship. They would have an intake on one side of the ship, and it would run through the beam of the ship and had an outtake. So when you went to the bathroom, you sat down, there was a stream of water below you that would carry the crap out the other side of the ship. And there was an officer side and there was an enlisted side. And he goes, these enlisted guys were upwind. They would take and make paper hats out of newspapers. They would make like a ship, and they would light the tip of it on fire and then stick it down in that water, and it would go across just to burn everybody's butt. You'd hear everybody go, whoo, ah, whoo, ah! You had to jump up real quick, and the ship you knew something was about to pass under you. Did they have that sort of arrangement on the Astoria? Did anybody ever talk about?
Fred Lind wrote about that. Yeah, they absolutely did the same thing, and yeah, they also had the red toilet seat, which was supposedly set
if
aside.
the guy had VD, that
for-
was
if
the
the
one
guy
he
had
could
VD.
use.
That's the one he used, and Fred always used it because he's like, nobody's going to own up to that, so that's the cleanest seat in here. So I'm always using the red seat.
You know, I actually snagged a picture of a red seat somewhere off of Quora or whatever that question thing, and it had just like a row of these toilet seats, and then there was one red one, and it said, "Anybody know what this is?" You know, somebody know what this is. That is just awesome. Well done for a guy that never served, and your interviews and your technical stuff really impressed a Marine. I mean, I've been on one ship. I was a second lieutenant, and I spent one night on a ship, and we did the amphibious assault at Little Creek Amphibious Base exercise we call Bass Selects. So I spent one night on a ship, and that was it for my entire Marine Corps career. So to put me in there was fantastic. It was like this guy Bio wrote about being an F-14 Rio. He put you in the back seat of the F-14 on the missions and working the scope and working while you're thinking about the intercepts and stuff. You put me in a light cruiser during war. That was fantastic. Well done.
Thank
I
you.
like it.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege being here. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for your time. If you hang out for 1 second, I will say goodbye to everybody and we'll wrap it up. Just hang out for 1 second, all right?
Sure.
Hey, Dad, thanks again for you joining us as well. I appreciate you.
John, such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh. And thank you for your book.
Well, thank you for your service, sir.
All right. So hold on a second, guys. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it. It truly is, like I told you, when you read this book, you're watching a TV series. It was that into it in terms of character development, technical stuff, the war, the tension. Highly recommend. It's August right now. Order the book now. You'll have it in time for your dad, your uncle, your husband, brother, anybody that's a rust picker out there serving in the United States Navy or even a Marine, anybody into the World War II stuff. Definitely gather it. Buy that book for them. They will truly enjoy it. Until I see you next week, adios, hasta luego, avidesen chus, sheshini, au revoir, domarigato gozaimasu, tano shindi, kudasai, ciao, arrivederci, tashakur, assalamu alaikum, das vidanya, nastastrovia, dobi jania. I got something, I think. Let's see, which one are we going to do this one? Thanks to my good friend, Michael Costanza. Here we go. You guys have a good one until I see you next week.